Good morning. It is 8:04 a.m. on Sunday, June 28th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. And because it is Sunday, I am continuing my rewatch of The Legend of Korra with Book 2, Spirit, Episode 1, Rebel Spirit. So, changing things up. New season. And one of the things that they actually acknowledge in the commentary for this episode is that they somewhat regret not actually dealing more with the fallout of the previous season. Because, recall, even though Korra managed to defeat Amon and send him running away, not only just defeating him in battle, but kind of exposing him as a fraud, and they also stopped the technological firepower from Hiroshi Sato, but there were a lot of people supporting the Equalists and they just all went away. Guess it's fine now. At the same time, they basically point out when they talk about this in the commentaries, they regret not dealing with that a little bit more. But on the other hand, that's the fallout of the old story. It is not the new story. The new story takes Korra into a different sort of arena, as opposed to made literal by the fact that she's no longer on the fire ferrets, for example. But I think that's fine. But mostly they just they leave that alone. We're moving forward. So we have everyone kind of in a new, where we catch up with everybody, right? So Korra herself has been making substantial progress on on her airbending. Like another one of the details of not resolving from the end of last season is, of course, the idea of like, oh, how many people had their bending taken away by Amon? Did Korra restore all of them? Just her friends? We don't know. It's fine. We're done with that. That was 6 months ago. It's all fixed. It's better now. But in any case, Korra has made substantial progress. We see her doing the little air scooter race with Tenzin's kids, and we see her behaving somewhat impulsively and competitively, like we might expect from Korra, using the avatar state to win the race, which Tenzin chews her out for, probably kind of rightly, because she's a little full of herself. She's a little too determined to, like the idea of like, well, I'm the avatar, therefore the avatar state, I'm the expert, so I should get to decide when it's appropriate to use. But of course, one of the things that we know about the avatar state from the larger lore in the previous series is that like the avatar state not only is not trivial because it's very powerful, but also like there's a specific vulnerability there. The avatar state is not all powerful, and it can it can be some like serious consequences. But in any event. This bit's mostly played for humor. But so she is still bridling a little bit under Tenzin's teaching. She feels like she's pretty much mastered airbending, but he feels like she has a lot more training to do. He wants her to go on a trip to visit all of the air temples to learn more about airbending history. And it's like this picks us up at a fairly familiar beat to start with for Korra and Tenzin. Meanwhile, Mako is a cop, which I think plays differently for me now than when the show was new. I mean, to an extent we could say, okay, well, but he's chasing bad guys. Yeah, okay, except we didn't actually see them do anything except run away from him, so it's not like we, see him interrupt them in the process of some crime or something like that. Instead, it's just kind of a fight as he chases them down, and it's an excuse for an action sequence where he's on his motorcycle, and that's pretty cool and all. But like I said, it just sort of, I find myself, I find that sort of plot line less appealing than I might have once upon a time. Meanwhile, poor Bolin still trying to do the professional bending thing, but because both Korra and Mako have, left to go on to other things, he is trying to build up a new team with new teammates, and it's not going great. And they break the record for shortest match due to the quickest total knockout. Not great. Meanwhile, though, I didn't mention, but over at Air Temple Island, we also established that Tenzin's brother Bumi has retired and is now living there at Air Temple Island and um, uh, gets on his brother's nerves. um, let's see. Oh, and then last but not least of our main characters, we have Asami, who is trying to do her best to rebuild future industries after her father's betrayal. And although they still have some remarkable inventions, some of them literally the ones that Hiroshi was trying to take over the city with, um, a lot of people don't want to work with them because of their association with the Equalists, which like makes sense, but also again seems like it kind of ignores the lots of people who are actually on that side. So I feel like if they were looking to tell a different sort of story, it might be kind of interesting if she found herself in the position of like, the only people who want to work with her are the people who were on the equalists' side and she disagrees with, but they're the only ones that want to deal with future industries. But, we're not telling that story. It's different because instead, what she is determined to do is to revitalize the industry by going to meet with a new investor who coincidentally is going to be down at the same place that everyone else is going. So isn't that great? Everyone gets to travel there together even though they're going for completely different reasons, which I have no complaints about because I want everyone to stay together in any case. And also because let's just continue Asami's thread here. She gets to introduce Varric and Julie into the narrative, which delights me to no end. I love Varric and Julie, and if you're only watching this for the first time, you could certainly be forgiven for maybe not even remembering who Julie was. Julie was Varric's assistant, but certainly I'll just go ahead and say she becomes uh, a notable character in her own right. But Julie do the thing is a running gag line that just I'm delighted to see return to the make its premiere on the show. But so Asami and Bolin, recruits Bolin to kind of help her, give her some moral support as she goes to meet with this guy. And this guy is what I guess there's maybe a little bit of this, like Thomas Edison meets Douglas Fairbanks, or Harry Houdini, maybe. Like he is someone like we are introduced to him as he is sitting on a cushion or in a circle with everyone watching him, and then declares that he had just levitated. And so there's a question there immediately of like, Asami has just told Bolin like, don't say anything. We need to impress him, but Bolin can't help but point out you weren't levitating, even though everyone else had applauded. But of course, this reveals Varric just saying, "What? I wasn't." And instead of being mad at Bolin, he's mad at everyone else for pretending that he was. Is like, I thought I was. Why didn't you guys tell me if I really wasn't? Now I look like an idiot. And then he fires the guy who supposedly was teaching him how to levitate. So he's a character that, as we'll learn more about him, is not especially altruistic in his motives, but he is wealthy and willing to invest in future industries. But he is also starting a new line of what he calls movers, is basically the invention of movies in the this setting, and so establishing that as his new passion, but also that he's willing to help invest in future industries helps Asami, and that's kind of where we stand with that storyline is that this guy is kind of he's a big personality. He's very excitable, but he's also very powerful and wealthy, and so someone you kind of want to have on your side if you can. But he's also a little bit frivolous, a little bit crazy, and yeah, it's I'm excited to have Varric and by extension Julie back on the show because I like them. Uh, one, let's do a little bit of a tangent here, just because I remembered that I didn't mention it up front. One is that at least I don't recall exactly how much of the season is impacted by this, but at least the first bit of it was animated by a different studio, and so the animation does look a little different. I feel like it's not terrible, but I think it lacks some of the fluidity of some of the previous seasons. The characters look a little bit different. I feel like it's general. Over the years, the general consensus seems to have come down on the idea that at the very least, the first half of book two is Korra at its sort of lowest point. Like it's the worst part of the show. And I don't know. I tend to, when I watch TV shows, I don't usually think about it like that. I'm not one of those people who has to say, okay, let's rank the seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from best to worst. Like, I just, like, that's not how I process the shows. I tend to think of it as just it's a story and it's all part of one story, and I don't really usually think about like, well, what's the part of the show that I like the least? But the fan consensus has seemed to say that it's this segment, and that we'll kind of see how I feel about it as we revisit it. But at the very least, in this episode, I think that I'm relatively happy continuing the story. Just to finish the thread with Bolin, we have him also fall into the orbit of Korra's cousins, Desna and Eska, who are a pair of twins, the sons of Unalaq, who we'll talk more about in a moment. But they're basically creepy twins, one boy, one girl. Bolin finds both of them hot until he realizes one of them is a guy, at which point he's like, oh, okay. But he's going to mostly focus on the girl as his thing. And they do look very similar in both dress and appearance, just kind of all buttoned up in robes and sort of look very much like each other, except Eska, the girl, does have sort of eye makeup. But there is a very entertaining exchange where he basically goes up to make his move, runs into them like a brick wall in the sense that they are just almost immediately talking more to each other about him than talking to him. But we have Eska basically say, it might be entertaining to to spend time with someone so rough and uncultured, and then turns to Bolin and says, I will make you mine. And we have some excellent vocal performance from Aubrey Plaza for Eska, but he's like, wait, make me yours? You mean like a boyfriend or like a slave? She says, yes. Now win me prizes at this carnival that they're at. I find that enormously entertaining. It's an interesting plot thread over the course of the season, too. But so now let's talk about Mako and Korra. We have some pretty standard fare stuff relationship-wise between them. They're definitely boyfriend and girlfriend in this one, but I think it's notable given everything that happens later, that we really never see Mako and Korra in a stable, happy relationship. They are always bickering about something or other. Like, even when things seem temporarily resolved, it's always just like moments, and there's never just sort of an equilibrium that really establishes with them. But in this episode, we have the pretty standard stuff of he just can't do anything right. And I think it's relatively well written for being cliche, in the sense of him feeling like, you know, I'm trying to do what she says she wants, and nothing I do is right, and it's frustrating for him. Whereas she's, and it's again, it's the very cliche sort of thing where, but I feel like it's well written in the sense that her objections are kind of reasonable at each point too, because as it starts, she expresses her frustration that he's impressing his authority figure in the Republic City Police, although why he's able to just pick up and leave seems like they don't really deal with that. But anyway, she expresses envy that he's impressing his authority figure, whereas Tenzin just wants to control her all the time and won't listen to her. And what he says about it is, well, he's just trying to help you, which really does kind of talk, it speaks to her him taking Tenzin's side, essentially. And even though, of course, he is correct, we know that. But she's frustrated. And then later, she is feeling torn about the two different directions. And she explicitly says, help me, I don't know what to do. Tell me what you think I should do. And so this is a case where it's not just a matter of, like in the first situation, we have the classic setup of he just wants her to, or she just wants him to listen and express sympathy about how she feels. And instead, he sort of tells her she's wrong to feel that way and takes the side of the person she's frustrated with. Isn't helpful. But here, like, she has actually asked for his opinion. And because he's trying to be supportive, what he does is say, I will support you no matter what you decide, which kind of does not offer any advice, A, and also B, implies that it doesn't matter which she decides, that, like she is expressing, I feel like there are stakes and consequences for this decision, and although it's nice that he will support her either way, she has actually asked his opinion in this case. And then, yeah, so it just, isn't working. So, but then, at the end of the episode, they're kind of more or less reconciled a little bit. But again, I think it's notable that the two of them really never have a stable, happy relationship. But so now that we have, dealt with kind of everybody else, let's talk a little bit about Korra and what she's dealing with here. So, she's feeling a little bit stifled by Tenzin. She wins a minor victory in declaring that they're going to go to this Southern Water Tribe festival before starting to visit all of the different air temples. But then as they arrive, she meets Unalaq, who is her uncle and the leader, theoretically, of both water tribes, even though he's usually at the Northern Water Tribe, which is not where Korra grew up. But he definitely, she definitely knows him and knows her cousins, the twins, who are his kids. But he shows up and he is basically immediately this kind of like, well, I'm the expert in spiritual stuff. Which, again, not only have we established in book one that that's something she's kind of lacking in, but that's honestly something that Tenzin told her at the beginning of this episode, is that she needs to focus more on the spiritual stuff. But at this point, he brings up the idea that spirits are attacking sailors, which we saw a little bit of a cold open of in this episode. And she hadn't heard about it, probably because Tenzin felt like there was nothing she was ready to actually deal with yet, and it was not clear how big a problem it was yet. And so, but he basically gets to come in and say, because I am aware of this specific problem that you haven't told about, I'm going to frame that as they're keeping things from you. And he offers to be Korra's teacher. Now, one of the things that I think is immediately notable here is that it's not actually Tenzin who gets affronted about possibly being replaced as a teacher. We can obviously imagine he has feelings about that, but it is not him that expresses the immediate concern about that. It is actually Korra's dad, Tonrak, who is Unalaq's brother. And he's the one that says, no, Unalaq, that's not what's happening. Tenzin is her teacher, and you're not going to replace her. And on the one hand, Korra is maybe a little bit, reasonably frustrated to say, why does everyone else get to make this decision but me? Like, why is this not my call? But the fact that we have Tonrak specifically resisting that in a way there's some obvious emotional tension there that isn't really explained, really sets this up to be Tarlok 2.0, right? Because in that one we had Tarlok, who in principle seemed like he was offering Korra some of what she wanted, but Tenzin was suspicious. And we were kind of suspicious on his behalf, and because of suspicious behavior generally. And so what we have here is a pretty transparent villain setup, but we just don't know why exactly, what's going on. But it's clear there's tension between Korra's dad and Unalaq, which is a red flag. And the fact that he is pretty brassy coming in to just immediately start saying, oh, here, within minutes of me meeting you again for the first time in a long time, I'm going to insist that you should leave your current teacher and come with me to learn all about spiritual stuff. But it's also clear that he's very focused on the spiritual stuff generally. He is, he uses his big speech at the festival to tell everyone at the Southern Water Tribe that they're a bunch of spiritual degenerates and that he's going to fix that. Soon time will come where the Northern Water Tribe can no longer stand idly by. And that's that's all pretty ominous, especially because he's talking about this carnival, which looks very fun and happy, if frivolous, as the biggest sign of, how far they've slid, and suggesting that the attacks are because they've fallen so far. And so, in any case, Korra is curious about that, and as she learns in this whole sequence that the decision to keep her isolated at the Water Tribe for all of her training, she had always thought that it was Aang's last wish that his descendant avatar in the next avatar incarnation be trained there. That she learns that it was actually Tenzin and her father Tonrak that made that decision. Which, again, I think... So, just to finish the plot here, there's tension, but then there's a spirit that attacks, and everyone tries to fight it, and no one can really do anything with it. Tenzin actually tries to talk to it, kind of like Aang did, but it doesn't work. And the only one who can actually stop it is Unalaq, who does some sort of water-bending related spirit magic that soothes the spirit and then disperses it or sends it away or something. And so he's the one that's successful there, and that's when Korra decides, obviously he's the one that can teach me the things that I really need to know. You're trying to say I don't have airbending yet, but I feel like I do. I'm going to go with him because he's the one promising to teach me things that seem actually useful in this current situation. But the fact that his last line in the episode is, "I have such big plans for you," like, it's pretty obvious he's the bad guy, and we just don't know what his deal yet is. His deal is yet. But Tenzin accepts her decision and plans to leave. Leave to do this visit of all of the air temples, even though Korra is staying behind. So that's kind of what's happening. But I think my only real frustration in this episode is actually that Unalaq does feel too much like Tarlok 2.0. It just feels a little bit like that same kind of beat. And it is also a little bit frustrating that the so much of the tension that's driving Korra into Unalaq's clutches is her frustration with Tenzin and her father, but they don't really explain themselves, right? Like, she doesn't really give them a chance. They don't really, like, why does her father, why is he so insistent about, Unalaq not being her teacher? Why? We don't know. And obviously we'll find out. But I think to some extent, her decision is made on the basis of him being a better communicator and also some deception that honestly feels so much like what Tarlok did that we kind of wish she was a little bit more savvy about recognizing it. But at the same time, I think it is good writing in some respects that Korra, frankly, is pretty easily manipulated by anyone who tells her what she wants to hear. Namely, that there are more important things that you could be learning, and you are right to feel stifled and controlled by them because they are stifling and controlling you, and I'm the one that can teach you new, exciting, useful things. Which just plays into what she had already been frustrated by. Right? So, it's I feel like there's a little bit of frustration, and maybe this is where people have some quarrels with this plot line, is just it's so transparent that Unalaq is the bad guy that it's frustrating watching our heroine make this mistake. And maybe that's part of what's going on. But I do think that Unalaq does have some interesting motivations going on here that we'll explore more, obviously, as the season develops. And so we'll go ahead and leave it there. I think maybe just the last thing that I haven't really commented on is we see more of Boomy, who we only just saw briefly at the end of last season. And we also now meet Kaya. So we've now met all three of Aang's children. One of the notable elements of it seems to be that Tenzin is the only one of the three that has airbending, which is interesting. I mean, I guess in some respects, the idea of if Aang was the last airbender, then he has kids with Katara, who's a waterbender. It's not obvious that all of his kids would be airbenders, right? But that it's only one of the three is something that becomes kind of more of a plot point later. Like, not a plot point so much as a character motivation. But what we see is that Tenzin, of the three kids, was the youngest, and he's the one that's just very serious and kind of sensitive, and he kind of gets picked on in a sibling sort of way by both Boomy and Kaya. And we see at least a little bit of that where they're kind of making fun of him. And there's a moment where we see Katara kind of observing that with some sadness. Yeah, which, like, I get it. She's a mom watching her grown children bicker. That's not fun. Anyway, but it's somewhat fun for us, but also somewhat speaks to some personal issues that we're going to guess what we're going to see explored more as the season progresses. So I think we'll go ahead and leave it there for now, and I will talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes, and then next Sunday we'll continue with Book 2, Episode 2, The Southern Lights.